not to get too cartoony so as to deviate too far from what we had established with the previous games. So the next core philosophy is strong silhouettes. And in the environment, this serves some multiple purposes, really. The biggest one for us, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, is it actually supports the gameplay fairly well. When you open up the gameplay space and use larger shapes to define your gaming world, it actually allows for a lot more creatures on screen. And that's really the important thing for us, is to get as many creatures on there so that you can kill them as fast as possible, which is just kind of what the Diablo game is all about. And as we said, that's really our job, is to support the gameplay. The other interesting side effect of creating strong silhouettes is that it adds to the epic feel. When you create large shapes, large bricks, walls that have interesting silhouettes to them, it really makes the universe much more of a fantasy land. If you look around us here in the convention hall, for an example, a lot of the angles and silhouettes that you see here are very straight, very 90-degree, and that's something that we try to avoid because you see that on a daily basis. Everything that we see in the real world is very straight and angular. So in the game world, because we want to transport you to a different location and really represent ourselves as a fantasy realm, it's very important to us to, ground it in reality. We have, walls that go straight up and down, but within that wall, there's a lot of shape, a lot of different bricks standing out, railings that have good shape, things like that. So it just makes it more visually pleasing, as well as supporting the gameplay again by opening up that gameplay space and allowing as many monsters on screen as possible. Now, color was probably one of the most controversial things that we were trying to work with here in the game, because as I said, our memory was actually a little bit different of Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 than we had thought. Originally, we thought, man, this, it's going to be cool. It's going to be this gray, washed-out universe, really dark, just nooks and crannies of just black, right? But when we actually went back and played it, there are some very vibrant areas within Diablo and Diablo 2, and that was something that we really kind of latched onto and wanted to explore more. So we actually did a lot of research on horror movies or movies that we thought were accomplished that horror vibe very well. And one of the things that we were discovering was the use of color to establish mood, and we thought that was very important. And so that's something that we carried over into our art style for Diablo 3 as well, was choosing our palettes very, very carefully. Now we have, if you see up here on my slide, on the right-hand side, I have basically a gradient. These are just color swatches or color picks straight from the screenshots themselves. They're very, very vibrant. When seen just outside of the screenshot without any context, they're extremely saturated, very vibrant, but when you put them within context, which is the important thing about using color, it actually can establish a very powerful mood, using dark greens and dark blues to establish a horror vibe or a very ominous kind of Big Brother is watching type of a vibe. So you can get away with using very vibrant colors, which is very visually pleasing, but at the same time maintaining that core value of the Diablo franchise, which is maintaining that horror vibe. And when you also aren't afraid of color anymore, you can start to use color to your advantage to lead the gameplay where you want it to go. So if you have an overall color scheme of green, when you punch up and put a torch in that scene, that bright orange flame or that bright orange torch now becomes a beacon for the player to follow, making gameplay, again, which is what we're all about supporting, making gameplay easier for the player to understand, making it more enjoyable visually to look at, and just everything comes together more seamlessly that way. Now, dynamic animations might not seem like it would fit in an environment talk, but that was one of the big things that we wanted to bring into the environments of Diablo 3, which is making them feel more alive. Not only do we have destructibles, and that's what the video up here is kind of going over, is just a few examples, and I think you saw it in the gameplay trailer yesterday of how we're using the environment with selective destruction, using the environment to your advantage to possibly kill monsters, and ultimately, when we decided how much breakable stuff we wanted to put in the game, it really just comes down to, it's not really a scientific like a scientific formula or anything like that. It's really just, it's freaking cool to break stuff, and that's really what it comes down to. And so that's kind of what we go after, is just how much breakable stuff can we put into the scene before it gets too overwhelming. And it turns out you can put quite a bit in there because it's just a lot of fun to go around stomping stuff. doesn't really matter if the gameplay is not that fun. And so that's what our job is. You know, as beautiful as we want to make it, as talented as our art staff is, you know, we're not doing our job well if the gameplay doesn't read well, you don't know where you're going, the creatures don't pop off the background, you don't know, you know, what your hero class looks like very easily. So all of those core philosophies that we just talked about really kind of revolve around making the gameplay much more enjoyable. So those are our core philosophies, and I want to just give you a brief glimpse at how the overall workflow of our environment process works. We have a very talented design staff. Jay Wilson was talking yesterday with his level designers, Carl Lavoie, Mark Choi, and Dave Adams. We work with those guys very, very closely. As I said, you can't really support gameplay unless you have a good rapport with your designers, and that's really important for us at Blizzard. And so up here is just an example of a few early sketches of what kind of level designs look like. And for those of you who are interested in how our random dungeon system works, this kind of gives you a brief glimpse at how we do it. It's really kind of a room-by-room basis. And each one of these rooms has certain exits and entryways that we can snap together in different ways, kind of like Lego pieces or puzzle pieces. But this is where it all starts, with the design team giving us these simple little sketches, and we sit down and talk about them, talk with Leonard and the story guys about what we want to accomplish visually and what they need supported with our art. And so that's really where we start. The other thing we do at this time, because it's important, it takes a lot of effort to get an environment destructible, is we start talking about what we want interactive. What it is that we want to break, what we want animated, how we need to bring this thing to life. So here you can actually see, I think these are Carl Lavoie's sketches. His little cartoons are very entertaining. But you can see, you know, a minecart smashing into a wall, a cave, a simple cave-in, things like that. All of this needs to be designed ahead of time. These things don't just happen in the game randomly. We put them there on purpose. We're trying to support an overall game philosophy, an overall game idea, and we really need to design those things up front. So once we get these sketches and we've decided what we want destructible, that's when the art staff kind of goes in and, you know, we continually work with design, but it starts to be our iterative process. We start with a sketch, we start doing designs, do call-outs, color studies, and ultimately leading up to kind of the progression into the final piece of art that you see in-game. And this is really a very iterative process. I just showed you a simple slideshow right here about sketch to final, and this is it takes a lot longer than what I just showed you right there, but as you can see, the final in-game screenshot is a little bit different than what we had on the sketch side of things, but that's a natural progression in the iterative process that happens when you work closely with design. There are certain things that you want to accomplish. When you work closely with story, there are certain things that they want to accomplish, and everybody gets together and we work as a team to come up with the final artistic look. So that pretty much wraps up our process, and I think we're going to open it up now to questions.
Hello. So my question is connected to Diablo himself, the character. In the end of the Diablo 2, we went to hell, killed him, smashed the soul stone containing his essence, Bales, Mephistos. So basically we destroyed him completely. So how do you justify him coming back and creating trouble yet again?
First of all, you don't know for sure that Diablo's coming back. I mean, just because it's called Diablo. It's a very complex chain of events that we really don't have time to go into here. So, no, we can't. We don't really want to divulge too much of the story yet. Let's just say it's sure to be entertaining when you see it.
Hello. In the previous game, we had sort of quests to achieve to get, for example, the heroic coup. I was wondering if in these games we will have some sort of